Welcome everybody to our final Dream Job webinar of 2022. My name is Danny Rubin, I'm the founder of Rubin. We provide online instruction for business communication skills. And my colleague Mac just went over into the chat. You're good, Mac. You can go back. See you later. And we help students with how they communicate. And for those who are new to us, raise your hand if it's your first time at one of our Dream Job webinars. Any hands up for first time people? We always have some great returning folks and some new ones. And keep your hand up, teachers, if your students email you like they're sending you a text message. Any hands for emails like text messages? So what we do is give students guidance on how to communicate professionally for opportunities. And we do that through a curriculum called Emerge, which is a library of activities for employability skills, and through our conversations like today, talking with industry professionals about what they do in their job, and also why communication skills are important to be successful in that job. And today, our final session of the year, we're lucky to have Dr. Stephanie Lachman with us from Nevada State College, a school psychologist, and she's going to tell us about her job and her career so far, and what she's going to do into the future, what she's looking forward to achieving at Nevada State College. And just before we talk to her, I'm going to share my screen. I always give out resources and tell you what's coming up next. And we do have some webinars coming up in the new year. So let me bring up my screen. The first thing that we do, and we always mix this up, but I'm going to get my chat going again. You're very welcome. Thank you all for being here. Welcome to Richlands, North Carolina. We love to give out free resources. As I said, our company provides curriculum, webinars, instruction for communication. And we've made a free Google Drive folder for job interview skills. Topics like how to research a company you like, how to send an email requesting an informational interview, the smartest questions to ask during the interview, how to answer any of their questions with a story of your own hard work, and how to write a great thank you note. And if you'd like these resources, I saw Rosa. Hi there, Rosa. She knows how we do it. I'll explain in just a second what we like to do to make it nice and orderly in here. We also always give out this document too, if you don't have it. It's an online presentation checklist. It's a quick one-page bullet-pointed list of ways to give effective presentations online, how to prepare, how to deliver it, how to hold the audience's attention. If you'd like these resources, just as Rosa did, go to the chat right now, type the word interested and your email address. Interested and your email address. And what we do is we'll send it out to you tomorrow. And if you are new to our community, then we will follow up with an invitation on your calendar for Wednesday for a brief conversation. So we can help you to locate this material and pass it around, not just your class and your school, but your district. Push these ideas out into your district and let every student benefit from these techniques to help with communication. I saw a question about we're going to make the interpreter screen bigger in just a moment. I'll turn off my share and it will all be the same size again. Okay. So just hang tight on that. Appreciate you asking. Okay, a couple other things while you put your information in the chat, keep going. Again, this is for the teacher, so please teacher emails only in the chat. Looking ahead, we're right around the corner, 2023, and we're going to start the new year. Right after the New Year's Day, we're going to start with a webinar on the world of a fashion designer on January 5th at 12:30 Eastern. So look out for emails about that. We're going to put our full winter spring schedule out actually tomorrow. And that'll be the first one you can sign up for. So keep an eye out very soon for all the sessions for next semester, but especially this one right after the new year. Finally, if you'd like to have these resources for job interview, you can send us an email to support@rubineducation.com, and we'll send you the job interview resources that way, support@rubineducation.com. And finally, everybody here today with us live will have a chance will receive a certificate for being here. You'll get that in your email to the teacher or to the student if you registered on your own, and you'll have a printed certificate you can take with you to show that you were here today. All right, so lots of good stuff. today and into the new year. And again, now I've turned the screen share off. So now we have, hopefully, Jenny Jackson, our sign language interpreter, is large enough now for students who need that. Let's bring in Dr. Lockman. Again, thank you for your time today.
Hi.
At a busy time of year. Everybody's coming and going, and so we appreciate it. Let's start with telling us your career background and how you led to the present day in the role that you have.
Yeah, so I started my journey at Michigan State, and upon graduation, I actually went to Indiana University Bloomington for my graduate degree, which led me to the University of Nevada, Reno for my doctorate degree. And while I was there, I became a school psychologist in the Carson City School District, spent 12 years in public schools, and recently transitioned over to faculty at Nevada State College.
That's pretty good. You did that. I
Yeah.
said, can you try to do it in a minute? Now it's probably even less. So at Nevada State College, tell us what your job looks like today. What are you doing every day?
So we are actually creating a pathway from high school to graduate school. So as we know, there is a massive shortage in school-based mental health providers, but we have an uptick in mental health needs of our students, but we don't have enough providers to actually support all of the students that we have. So at Nevada State College, we are encouraging our high school students to enroll in dual credit and come to the college of their choice, preferably Nevada State, graduate with a bachelor's in psychology or education, social work, with a minor in school-based mental health, which allows them in the state of Nevada to be a psychological services assistant. So those students can work under a licensed psychologist in Clark County, gain that experience, and then come back to Nevada State and earn their EDS in school psychology.
And what is an EDS?
It's an educational specialist degree. So it's in between a master's and your doctorate degree.
Okay, thank you. One thing that we like to make these very teachable sessions. And one thing that I like to do is ask follow-up questions. And we talk about that a lot in our webinars, that it's okay to ask about something that you may not understand. You said EDS, and I just said, what does that mean? And you were happy to tell me, right? You weren't like, oh, why doesn't he know that? It's just showing that you're interested and you want to know more. So I'm going to ask you a follow-up question. You said there's been a rise in sort of mental health needs among students and not enough, licensed professionals to manage that. Do you attribute a lot of that to COVID? Was it a big issue before COVID? Is it worse now? Where do you think that trend has come from?
So it's two facts. So we have the shortage of the school-based mental health providers in general because we're not graduating enough. So I was actually in a high school presentation yesterday, and I was explaining to the high school students about the shortage, and that I went to a very large university, right? Tens of thousands of individuals, likely thousands had graduated with a bachelor's in psychology or some psych-related background. And then I asked them this question: how many did they think I graduated with at Indiana University Bloomington? How many people were in my cohort when I graduated? And they thought, oh, 100, 75, 90. It was 8. So how do we, if we're graduating 8 people, and as we see many of us leave the field and go into higher education, we are not graduating enough. So we are not producing enough to actually meet the number of students. So there's that fact. The second fact is that COVID did increase the mental health needs of our students, but social media is a really big issue that we're dealing with right now. Our students are lacking a lot of communication and social skills because their lives are on a phone. They're not face-to-face talking to somebody. And we're seeing some difficulties at home in terms of just parenting and children being held accountable for their actions.
Wow.
And so we're seeing a lot happening.
Thank you for sharing that. And we also want to practice our listening skills in here. And also we talk a lot about the power of numbers. Now you said at your undergraduate program like Michigan State, thousands and thousands of students, very large university. And at Indiana, students or teachers, tell me in the chat, how many people were in her graduating class at Indiana? What was that number she just said? Because it caught me off guard. I was expecting a bigger number than that. What was that number? Thank you. 8. Numbers are very important. Numbers prove our point. If she said, oh, I had a big class at Michigan State and a smaller class at Indiana, would you have thought 8? No, I would have thought several hundred would be small versus several thousand. So numbers are important and they help to tell our story. We all have numbers in our own lives. So think about the numbers you could share to show what you've accomplished or how many people were involved in things that you've done. So as we continue the conversation, I encourage everyone now to go to the Q&A and along the bottom of Zoom. And I want you to start putting your questions for Dr. Lockman. What do you want to know about psychology, about her work, and anything in that area? Start putting your questions and I will go through them. And as you do, put your name and your school next to your question so we can give you proper credit for posing your question and participating in our webinar today. So for you to do the work that you're doing now, what kind of training did you have to go through? I mean, you went to 3 different universities. Is that pretty standard to be a school psychologist? You need the undergrad, the graduate, the doctorate. Is that standard among your peers?
That's a really good question. So an EDS, an educational specialist, that's what we termed a terminal degree. So that means that you can get your bachelor's and your EDS and go practice as a licensed school psychologist. I earned my master's in addition to my EDS just because I wanted the opportunity to teach in the classroom should I decide school psychology was not the right fit for me. But I knew that I wanted to move into a professor job. I liked the research, I liked teaching. And so I ended up getting my doctorate in something very different. So I ended up going into that disability studies and special education. So now I have both backgrounds, but you do not have to get your doctorate degree to be a licensed psychologist in the schools.
Okay, thank you for that. And I see some good questions coming in, but please put your questions in the Q&A, not the chat, because the chat is hard to follow and their Q&A, it's easier to see. We have a lot of really good questions. Danielle from, I think it's in Oregon, Danielle Mannion. What describe the setting, your work setting? What does it look like? Where are you every day? What kind of environment?
So when I was a practitioner, you can work with 3 to 21-year-olds as long as they are enrolled in a school. So you can work in early childhood and working with the babies. You can work in elementary, you can work in middle, or you can work in high schools. So it really depends on what your interest is, the population that you like to work with. I've worked at all of them and I love the babies. I will work with K1 and 2 if I could. That's my population.
Why is that?
They are funny, they are silly, they have no filter. They will tell you everything and the first thing that comes to their mind. And it's a lot of joy to work with them in sometimes dark times when we are in schools. There's sadness, of course. And so seeing their faces just makes your day so much better.
I like that. Thank you. We have, well, okay, so on top of that, Elizabeth from BOCES in New York, she said, how many students would you see daily? How many appointments? How does the day organized? What does it look like?
So when you have that idea of a clinical psychologist or a therapist, you're thinking of like a couch or a chair and you're having talk therapy. School psychologists, we actually do evaluations for special education services. So at the start of your year, you're going to get a caseload, which are students who currently have an IEP, that individualized education plan for special education services, and you do their evaluations throughout the year. So I've had caseloads as small as 35. I've had caseloads in the hundreds. It really depends on how many schools you have. And you typically will see 1 to 2 students a day. And in that assessment part, you're looking at cognitive assessments, academic assessments, social observations. You'll look at their relationships with their peers. You'll talk to parents. You'll talk to teachers. And so you're getting a full comprehensive view of how that child is as a learner.
Wow, I wouldn't have expected 1 to 2 a day. So if you saw one patient a day, are you with them for several hours?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
So is it really kind of you're there with them as long as they need you to be there, or is it like already defined that I'm giving you from 8 a.m. to, noon or something like that? I mean, how do you, I would have thought you'd say I have a student coming in every 30 minutes or every 45 minutes.
It depends on the parameters of your evaluation. So if it's a younger child, you know that they're not really going to be able to sit for an extended amount of time. So if I'm working with a kindergarten student, I may only do in 45-minute sessions over the course of 6 different times. But if I'm working with the older children, I know that they can sit for 3-4 hours with a break. And so we'll do their full IQ cognitive assessment. We'll talk about their behavior and their feelings and their peer
Wow,
relationships. Yeah, we'll do their academic assessment. We try to get it done all at one time because especially right now with how rigorous school is and you don't want to miss a day, they don't like to be pulled out of class for very long.
sure. Wow. Okay, that's helpful to understand. A good
Mhm.
question from Mackenzie, Battle Mountain High School. How did you know you wanted to become a psychologist?
So when I was actually in the psych program at Michigan State, you're in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. So you have no idea that anything beyond, clinical psychology, organizational psychology, sports psychology, it doesn't exist. So I actually was taking a course in the School of Education and I learned about school psychology. It's not housed in your psych building, it's housed in the School of Education because we bridge that gap between education and psychology. And I remember sitting through an undergraduate course and I was like, wow, I can work with kids of all ages, still be in the school setting, but be a psychologist. And so, because the numbers to get in to programs are very small, it's pretty selective. I actually applied to social work programs to be a school social worker. I applied to clinical psych. I applied to school psych because you needed to have options. I wasn't just going to apply to one program and then not have any
Hmm.
options. So once I started the school psychology program, it was like sort of that aha moment. I was like, I found my fit. And so it was like all the different pathways that I took through the different courses that was like, wait, I think school psychology is really what I'm interested in versus a different branch of psychology.
So you would recommend, and this is, we can get into this, like, let's say there's a student right now in high school, there's many watching right now. Are there opportunities for those students to explore different aspects of psychology while they're in school, like shadowing or doing like a rotation? From what you've seen, what's available to them?
So if you have dual credit opportunities, that's going to be your best option. I don't know how many high schools do have that, but here in Nevada, we will have high schools that are affiliated with colleges and you can take dual credit. And that allows you to do field experience courses sometimes, and you get to see the different professions that are available. But I remember in college, and so I'm sure it can be used in high school, reaching out to different members of the community. And so I actually shadowed a school psychologist. I shadowed a marriage and family therapist. I
Hmm.
shadowed a clinical psychologist while I was in college. And that really helped me understand what I wanted to do and what I didn't want
Hmm.
to do.
So let's take that as an opportunity to discuss what schools often call employability skills or work readiness skills, where you'd say, okay, I want to shadow a psychologist. How would they go about doing that? If they were to call the office, right, or walk in or send an email, what are you looking for from them? What kinds of communication or professional skills are you looking for? Even just to agree to them, for them to shadow you and be in the office, what do you want to see from a professional standpoint from the students?
So a phone call is great. An email is great as well. But I feel like as long as the person can express to me what they are interested in and why they would like to shadow me, when I work in the high school setting, I can tell you that some of the most difficulties that I see is in writing. So if they want to send an email, I really suggest that you seek help from an adult in drafting that email because what you text is very different than how you write. And so we need to make sure that punctuation is there and grammar is there. And there's the mechanics of writing. That's one of the areas in particular that I see a lot of struggles in. And then,
Go ahead and finish.
sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, so that is something, if you are going to write an email, but a phone call. I remember when I wanted to get my internship in Carson City, I called and I called and I called over and over again to make that connection and have that relationship with the director, because at first they're not sure that it's something that they're interested in. But once they get to know you and your personality and see that you are pretty persistent and you want to stay committed, they're more interested in agreeing to what it is that you're saying.
Great advice. I have one more question on the communications front, then we'll get back to the questions in the Q&A. How do you use communication skills in your job? Is writing important in your job? Do you have to write things down, file reports? Why is it important that you have good writing skills, good punctuation, attention to detail in the work that you do as a psychologist?
Yeah, that's a really good question. A lot of what I do is writing. So after I see my students and I do that evaluation, I have to write a psych report. I have to write up the evaluation assessment results. And they're usually 15 to 20 pages long. And you have to share that with the team. And that could be a teacher, a parent, administrator, speech therapist, nurse, occupational therapist. There's a whole team that supports this child. And that report goes in their educational file. So as that child continues, someone down the road is always going to see your writing. And when you're trying to build that relationship with a parent and they can't understand what it is that you're trying to express, or they're seeing typos in your report, or you're mispronouncing their child's name, it creates a distrust. So we have to really make sure that our writing skills, our speaking skills are on par so that we build that trust and that relationship with that family.
Wow, that's a really great point, that mispronouncing their name, misspelling their name, typos, it creates distrust. I think that's a word we don't use a lot, but it's true that it hurts the relationship because they expect you to be professional and they're trusting you to help them. And then these little things can undercut that. So that's a great point. Let's get back to our Q&A. We have a good question from Sue in Elkhorn High in Nebraska. She says, what qualities does an individual need to choose this path? I'll expand on that and say, what are some good classes that students should be looking at in high school, college? What are some of the courses that would be a great foundation for this work?
Yeah, so definitely in high school, if they offer Psych 101, Social 101, understanding that children come from different backgrounds, different cultures, and that you have to be able to work with everybody. So if they have those courses within high school, college, I know there's a very scripted sequence of courses that you do have to take, but if you have the opportunity to take courses outside of that psych world, so in education, in social work, I would strongly suggest that. That's what I ended up doing to find this path.
Great. Kim Hermer and her students ask a question that it seems like an obvious thing, but I'm sure many people don't know. What is the main difference between psychology and psychiatry?
Good question. So psychiatrists go to medical school. You will go to med school and your residency is going to be in psychiatry. You'll be able to prescribe medication. Psychologists do not prescribe meds.
Okay, that is pretty clear. I hope Kim, it says Alex and her other students were wondering. I hope that was a clear answer. It was pretty to the point. Another question, helping us understand, and maybe it's different because you're working in a school setting versus like a clinical or a private practice, but how does the fee structure work? Like for a student to see you, does it go through their insurance? If they how does it work for them to be able to see you? What's that process like?
Yeah, so federal law actually mandates that every school that receives federal funds must have a special education process. And so any child who is suspected of having a disability, they receive services and evaluation from a psychologist free of charge. The school pays for it. So the school will pay for my salary and the child receives the psych services, speech services, nursing, occupational therapy, physical therapy, all free of charge because they're receiving federal funds from the government.
Oh, wow, interesting. So it's at no cost to the family if they've been identified as having disabilities or special needs. So that, well, let's say a student is not identified as special needs. They just need to speak to somebody. Do the same rules apply, or is it different?
If a child is going through a crisis, I have been called into threat assessments often. I will support them in that. Typically, though, it would be your school counselor, your school social worker, your safe school professional, or if your district has a crisis team that you call, like we in Clark County have a mobile crisis team, and there are therapists and counselors and social workers who will come to support that child.
Maybe you have some insight on this. Whenever tragically there's an incident at a school or in a community involving young people, they say, a crisis team has been dispatched to that school, if for students who need to talk. What does that actually look like? How many students do seek those services? Is there a group of people sitting in a cafeteria at tables waiting to talk to students? And like, what does that look like on the ground?
So it depends. In my experience, I have had a situation where children have lost their lives. And so we actually did set up in classrooms, and those who were affected were able to come and talk to us individually. If a child is experiencing like life-threatening thoughts, then whoever is on site is going to support that child until we make that phone call to the mobile crisis team, and we support that child until that team is able to come into play. We've also had situations with weapons, and so we've had to include law enforcement. So it really depends on the severity of the situation.
Okay. And on the heels of that, it's a good question from Battle Mountain again. Thank you, Battle Mountain. Zane, how is your mental health affected by working in this field? How do you deal with it to stay mentally healthy yourself? I mean, we just talked through, you've probably seen some tough moments. Some days are days, and some days are more serious than that. How do you kind of compartmentalize and stay optimistic?
No, that's a great question. It's hard, and it affects a lot of mental health providers, and that's why we experience burnout for sure. I made it a point, particularly when I started to have a family of my own, that I needed to leave work at work. And so what I would do is if I was having one of those moments where I was just so upset or something was bothering me, I needed to pick up a hobby, something that would allow me to release that stress. And so that's actually when I started to run. So I don't know if there's any runners on here, but it does allow you to compartmentalize and be like, okay, when I'm running, I can process what's happening. And then I need to stop. I need to say, okay, when I walk in that door and my children are there, I need to put what just happened aside and focus on being a mom. But it's hard. It takes practice. And I did leave the field, so it does get you at some point. So it's no one's perfect, but I did eventually have to say, you know what, I need to find a different path because COVID in particular was really, really hard on a lot of educators.
Sure, I understand. For students who are looking at it, haven't gone into this yet, would you say even if they don't do it for their entire career, is it a good foundation, a good training ground, a good jump off point to do other things? Like, you wouldn't want to, I know you're not here to dissuade any student from doing this work. So like, how do you view it? Like, are you grateful that you did it and you're a well-rounded professional because you worked in that sort of school setting the way you did?
Oh yeah. I wouldn't trade those 12 years for anything. I learned a lot about myself as a person. It humbles you. It creates empathy. You work with families who you've essentially changed the whole trajectory of that child's life. And I wouldn't trade that for anything. I've enjoyed those moments. Being a school psychologist, even having a graduate degree, allows you to do more than just what your degree entails. So let's say I decided I didn't want to be a school psychologist anymore. I could find different avenues to still work and maybe not be in the school. So I could go into more of a leadership position. I could maybe be a supervisor. They're always looking for like faculty to teach. It's just like a part-time instructor. So let's say you like the teaching part, you can find a college or a university in your area that focuses on psychology, and you can teach there as well. But the transition for me was more so I wasn't tired of working with the kids, but I was tired of doing it kind of solo because there's not enough of us. There is no substitute for a school psychologist. I can't
Right,
call someone and be like,
right,
hey, there's 5 kids to see this week. And so I thought, what can I do? Right? If it doesn't exist yet, how can I build that? And
right.
so that's what we're doing at Nevada State.
Well, you're helping to create the solution and put more
Yes.
people out there to do it, which seems like it's not like you left the field and went to some completely different industry. You've stayed in it and you're trying to solve a problem that you identified in the job. So I think that's very worthwhile. It's certainly not like a quitter mentality at all. It's trying to help the situation in a different way. So I give you a lot of credit. A good question here from Kim Hermer's class. How would your education change if you didn't want to work in a school, but rather as a psychologist, like private practice or, at some other environment? If you're not going to work with students, maybe adults, how does that change your preparation and your training?
So if you have a degree in school psychology and you want to work in private practice, you actually have to get your doctorate degree because you have to take the licensing exam. So you would have to be board certified. Different. So let's say you wanted to go get your EDS in school psychology, you practice for 10 years, and then you're like, nope, I want to do private practice. You wouldn't be able to do that. You'd have to go back and get your doctorate degree. But I have a friend who actually left the field and went to work at a retirement community because now she has a lot of like the therapy skills, communication skills, and she's a director there. So she still has that psych background, but she totally shifted age groups.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. And great questions. We'll try to get a couple more in. I want to take a little pause. Dr. Lockman, stay with us. We talk a lot in here. You've already heard me say, we talk about writing skills. And you mentioned it yourself that if you're going to reach out and ask to job shadow, your email cannot look like a text. You don't want to see that. It's not going to get you excited, right? To like, ooh, let me write them back. You'd rather, you probably would take a little bit of a pause. Do I really want to deal with this versus, yes, this would be a great opportunity. So I want to share one of the worksheets from our company's Emerge curriculum. It's a downloadable worksheet, and we have a little writing guide where we learn not to use lowercase I and the letter U instead of the word you. And what I want the students to do, can everybody see this? Dr. Lockman, can you see this worksheet? Okay. Okay. What I want everybody to do is right here. I would like the students and the teacher, you can do it on behalf of the students if you're at the controls. I want you to write out this line right here as a complete sentence, put a period at the end of company, and I want you to write it with proper grammar. Can everybody go to the chat right now and write this sentence for me in proper grammar? Because it's a simple exercise and maybe it's obvious to you. And while the students do that, Dr. Lockman, is this what you're talking about too, that you want to see a complete sentence? Which words should be capitalized, not abbreviating, no emojis, no shorthand? Is this the kind of thing that you're looking for from a student?
Yeah, I want to make sure that they're able to put a complete sentence together that is grammatically correct. And we're not their friend. We're not texting back and forth. You could potentially be their boss or their colleague, and you need to make sure that their writing skills can reflect what your job entails.
Thank you. I think it's always important to hear it, not just from the teachers, not from the principal, and not from me, but from people who work in industry professionals who are in these roles where the students want to be. And they say, look, this is what you have to come with to be taken seriously. Because, and I appreciate all the students. Let me just give credit. There's so many in this list. This is great. Blue, Elena, April, Sue, Candace. Well, I think it's several of Candace's students under her name. So thank you all of Candace Santana's students. Angie, Natalie, great job. And it's important to understand the expectation out there, because I'm sure that the students sitting here right now, like so many others, they are hard workers and they have a lot to offer, and they would do a great job in any kind of intern shadowing capacity. But if their message is sloppy up front, it holds them back from what they might be able to do. And you're a very busy person, you're busy building out a program, and you don't have the time to sit there back and forth with someone who it seems like they're just not taking it seriously. Even if the student is trying to take it seriously, they don't know that you perceive it as the opposite. So that's why we always try to really tackle these little things when we're all together live. And I appreciate you sounding off on that. So let's kind of look big picture here as we get at 2:06 Eastern time. We got a few more minutes together. For students right now, if they're watching this and they're like, I would love to, explore this further, we just say that the first move for them is should they Google some psychology practices in the area? Should they ask their own school psychologist if they could shadow? Like, where would you say their first move should be?
Yeah, if they are in high school, I would reach out to your school psychologist. Every school has one. It amazes me every time I go into a high school, they don't know who their school psychologist is. You have one, ask around. And I would ask them about their job. I would do an interview for them and get to know what they do in and out, and just learn if this is something that you would be interested in doing, because our jobs are very different than a school counselor or a school social worker. So making sure that it fits within the realm of what you want to do with your employment. If you are in college, I would definitely reach out to the graduate program. If they don't necessarily have a degree in school psychology, they likely have a degree in clinical psychology or organizational psychology, and meet with those professors and graduate students and see if that's something that you would be interested in, because you don't know until you know, right? So you want to be as informed as you possibly can be to make sure that you're making the right choice for yourself.
Thank you. You don't know until you know. And that's on our worksheet, by the way. We have spaces to put some great advice that our guest gives. And that's a great one. You don't know until you know. And that's a lot of these webinars, is exposing students to different jobs that they didn't know much about. And then perhaps it's something that they really want to look at after our session. I'm going to share my screen one more time. I mentioned this at the beginning, but if those who missed it, we'd love to give you a free Google Drive folder for lessons around job interview skills, how to prepare and research the company, email the employer, ask questions in the interview, answer questions in the interview, write a great thank you note, all with attention to detail, right? And using specific moments and numbers and all the things we've been talking about, being specific, being appropriate. That's going to help you stand out throughout the process. If you'd like that resource, along with a checklist for giving stellar online presentations. If you missed this at the beginning, I'll say it one more time. Just go to the chat right now. This is for the teachers in the room. Type the word interested and your email address. Interested and your email address. And we will pass the resources to you. If you are new to our community and new to our resources, we will send you an invitation on your calendar for Wednesday. If the time does not work, just reply with a different time. It's a very short call to email you the resources, point out where they are, and help you share them with your school. We can't talk with all of you in here, but we like to make that personal connection when we can. These are free resources for your school and your school district. Also, as I mentioned before, we have our next webinar after the new year, where we'll cover the world of a fashion designer on January 5th. So look out even tomorrow, Wednesday, for the registration for that session. And also, if you're watching this on a recording, you can email us at support@rubineducation.com, and we will send you the resources that way. And finally, everybody who's joining us live, look out in your email Wednesday for a certificate for being with us today. So lots of little things coming to you via email. So keep an eye on that before you head into the break. We'll get everything out this week, so nothing carries over to the holidays, and then we'll see you again in the new year. So as we start to wrap up here, I'll go back to Dr. Lockman and say, encapsulate for us what it is to be a psychologist. Where do you draw meaning? Why is there purpose in the work? Why have you dedicated your career to this field?
I knew I wanted to work with children and make a difference in their lives. So if that's something that you're interested in, I would definitely look in that education route. I get excited walking into a school, learning about the students, their stories, their day to day. And so it brought me a lot of happiness to be able to work with those children. But to see the families when they finally meet someone who can help and they're like, oh, you get it, right? You understand what I've been seeing for so many years that nobody would believe me. Nobody understood what I was seeing. And so becoming an advocate, becoming a voice for a lot of our families is a wonderful thing because our children, our families, especially here in Nevada and Vegas, they're first gen. They don't know the resources. They don't know what's available to them. Understanding that, college is accessible, graduate school is accessible. We just need to inform them so that they have the knowledge because knowledge is power. And that's what I have found in my job is really just being that advocate for our children and our families.
Thank you. Well said. And a good way to wrap up a few minutes early, which is okay. And I want to thank you, Dr. Lockman, for your time and your insights. Thank you, Jenny Jackson, for your services as well. Thank you to the teachers and the students for all the great questions, really good questions. We've had every webinar this fall. Every time we get excellent questions. Students really want to know. They are very interested and it comes through. So I appreciate everybody being part of all of our sessions since we started in September all the way to now in December. And we'll go again January to May of 2023 with some new careers. So keep an eye on your email for those. We're very excited about the new set of topics very soon. Until then, I hope everyone has a great holiday season, a happy new year. You stay warm wherever it's snowing. And if you're in Southern California, it's always nice. Well, I don't have to tell you anything because, life's good down there. But for wherever it's snowing on you, I hope you stay warm. And thank you very much for your time. The webinar recording, we'll try to get it on YouTube as soon as we can later this afternoon. If you need it immediately, send us an email and we'll send you the link when it's live. But everybody else, we'll send it out via email on Wednesday morning. Okay, so just stay in touch if you want it this afternoon. Thank you again, and we'll see you soon.